we'll get started. There might be some people that come in, but thanks for being here. I'm Pam Blumenthal. I'm the director of the Affordable Rents for College Students program at College Housing Northwest. And we're going to have a panel of students here, but before we get started, I'm going to do a little bit of a presentation and orient y'all to the work that we're doing. Was anyone here last year when we did a presentation? A little show of hands. Okay, one. Okay, so might be a little bit repetitive for you, but going over some things. A lot of things have changed in the last year as well. It's a program that College Housing Northwest has been around for a long time. I'll get into our history a little bit, but our program, the ARCS program, is relatively new. But before we get started, I wanted to just kind of give us all a minute to think about being a college student. And if you can think back when you were a college student, if you weren't a college student, think about maybe when you left home. What was it like living in your first place? Where did you rent a place? Did you have support from family? And if you could just think about that for a second and turn to somebody at your table and just briefly describe what that was like. Where did you live? Do you remember how much you paid for rent? Did you get support from family? So we're going to start with that. I'll give you up 3 or 4 minutes to find somebody to talk to. For those of you that just came in, we're doing a get to know you. If you could talk to your neighbor about where you lived when you went to college, what it was like, did you get support? I'll give you 1 more minute, then we're going to wrap up. Okay. Thanks everybody for participating in that. I think it's a good way to really reflect on what it might have been like when you were in college or when you left home, and what things we're going to be talking about the present day. And the things have changed quite a bit. Cost of college has changed. The population of students attending college, what the intensity and the need for a college degree, all of those things have shifted depending on your age. I know we're not all the same age here, but certainly for me. So I'm Pam Blumenthal, the director of the ARCS program at College Housing Northwest. I use she, her pronouns. I have been at College Housing Northwest since January of 2022, so not very long. And I was a partner with College Housing Northwest as the ARCS program started, because I worked at Portland Community College for 16 years. And as I was in a variety of roles, but I was a dean of students for a short time at the Sylvania campus. And I really saw at that time, which was in 2018, I really got to see the student need for housing. Students were living in their cars, sleeping on our campus. Students were sleeping in our bathrooms, and public safety had to remove them at night. I just we had faculty, we had staff supporting students and trying to find affordable housing. And you may or may not know that most students are not eligible for traditional affordable housing. Full-time college students can't live in LIHTC buildings, with some exceptions. But College Housing Northwest is a nonprofit. I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's go to the next slide. And I can talk about the problem. So I mentioned this. There are multiple factors contributing to student houselessness and housing insecurity, education costs, stagnant wages, socioeconomic diversity of students. In our program, majority of our students are first generation college students, so the majority of them are not getting support from family, both financially and emotionally. And then the decreasing supply of affordable housing as rents have tripled, quadrupled in this area. Students are pushed out, and they're also living on they might have housing for a period of time, but it's not safe. There could be partner violence. There could be, we have a lot of LGBTQIA students who come out and their families kick them out. So there's a lot of reasons for this increase. Next slide. Am I able to do it?
Sorry, I think your audio is.
Oh, I did it. Sorry, the formatting is a little off here, but so here's some statistics that nationally we see this to be pretty consistent. That 23% of students at 2-year institutions are experiencing homelessness, and about 50%, I think you'll see in the next slide, experience some kind of housing insecurity. So this isn't just a small problem. This is a very large problem. And there's an organization called the Hope Center out of Temple University that created surveys that now are happening nationwide. And the last survey that was done that I know that the data is out there for this is Oregon data. So in 2019, 8,100 students completed this survey for community college students. And 41% stated they were food insecure. And you may or may not know that every college, every public college in Oregon has a food pantry now, and partnerships with the Oregon Food Bank. And there's a lot of work being done on food insecurity, not solved, but progress. 52% are reported being housing insecure, as I mentioned, and 20% reported being homeless. So this is, again, this is local, this is a big issue, and not that solving food insecurity is easy, but there are more resources. It's not as expensive than providing affordable housing for the number of students in need. Next slide. And then this is an equity issue in that I know that this is a small chart here, but disproportionately, not a surprise to us, housing insecurity is impacting communities of color, with Black and Indigenous students being more affected than other populations, as well as I mentioned, that's not here, this is racial demographics, but LGBTQIA students, former foster youth, and first generation college students. We can go to the next slide. And this kind of goes without saying, but there is a return on investment here, right? Like the benefits of a college education there's a lot out there right now that with as much debt as students leave college with, is it really worth it? But we know through a lot of research that the best and most consistent way out of poverty is education. Doesn't have to be a 4-year liberal arts degree. It can be a 2-year certificate. It can be a trade school. In College Housing Northwest, we take students in all those situations. You don't have to be going to PSU, but there's a lot of benefits, both monetary and social, with having some kind of post-secondary credential. And obviously, our workforce needs educated workers. So this is a huge need, and affordable and safe housing is one way that we can make a real impact. We'll go to the next one. So who are we? Has anybody heard of College Housing Northwest before today? A little show of hands. Okay. So I didn't know much about College Housing Northwest when I started working with them 4 years ago, and when I was at PCC. But we are a nonprofit student housing organization. We've been around for 50 years, over 50 years. We were started by students at PSU as a student co-op, and then acquired property at a very low cost and grew over time to become a nonprofit. And so we've been mostly connecting with PSU, although we had operated a property in Corvallis for a while. But up until 4 years ago or so, we were keeping our rents as low as possible, 15 to 20% below market, trying to very student-centered. Students pay a very small deposit, no first and last month's rent. We limit barriers to entry, all the things to support students. We have employment opportunities. We have community assistants, which are kind of like RAs, that are people that live in our buildings and are supporting students. But we weren't addressing, still 15 to 20% below market, especially downtown. We weren't really making an impact on students needing our supports. So colleagues of mine before I was at College Housing Northwest started looking at other programs. There was one in Washington State, in Tacoma, called CHAP, and they were providing subsidies and partnering with a community college. And we started to model a program based on that. Next slide. So we are both a property manager, housing provider. We have developed properties and built properties. The first building on the slide is our building, the Amy, which is right next to PSU's campus on 405. That opened in 2019. And then now we have a program which is subsidizing housing for students. Still small, and I'll get into the numbers, but we are really focused on creating affordable housing at more scale for the need. We recently acquired a Project Turnkey hotel in Gresham, which we are converting to studio apartments. My colleague Alex is here, who's in charge of that project, and demo is starting soon, and we will have 75 units there, 75 studio apartments, and some of them will be no cost. So it's a big thing that that's just happening right now. Next slide. So how does ARCS work? So sorry, the mic is a little sensitive. So we're providing a rental subsidy, as I mentioned, and that can be 50% of our rent or 100%. And it kind of depends on the student situation. We have a partnership with DHS, Youth Experiencing Homelessness, where they're paying full rents for a year. And then students are able to hopefully pay something after that if they're still with us. Most of our students are paying 50% of what our rents would be. And that typically is around $600 a month, just as a round figure. And sometimes that includes utilities as well. We did a survey of students, community college and PSU students in, Alex, was it 2021, and asked them a lot of questions about housing, and $700 was the general amount that students felt like they could afford. And if you could find an apartment for $700 out there, it's be surprising. So that's kind of what we're basing our prices on. Students have to be enrolled at least half time, referred by one of our partners. The next slide, I'll show you who our partners are. So it is you have to be referred because we're small. We don't have the capacity yet to have students self-refer. They have to be in good academic standing and meet our general rental criteria. As I mentioned, we don't require rental history, no income requirements, no security deposit, no application fee. And we sometimes free Wi-Fi, depending on the building. Eventually, we're going to have free Wi-Fi for everyone. That's a goal. And we have eviction prevention services. We do everything we can to avoid eviction and work with students to have plans. And then the personalized support, a couple of our team are here who are ARCS coordinators. They're providing case management and engagement, working with students if they have an emergency, helping to connect them with resources, working with our partners as well to support students while they're living with us so they can be successful both in school and in their housing. Next slide. So right now our partnerships are with a PCC, PSU, Mount Hood, Clackamas Community College, New Avenues for Youth, NEA, and with New Avenues for Youth and with NEA, we have a partnership through DHS with them where they're providing more intensive case management for students who are the most in need. And those are typically youth under 24. Okay, I don't remember where I am. What's my next slide? Oh, so here's some data. So we started the program in 2020 and College Housing Northwest started with funding 20 spots that were subsidized. And since then, we've been doubling every year. This is the number of students we served last year is 73. We had 16 graduates of those living with us. Some of them stayed living with us because they may have completed an associate's degree and now are transitioning to PSU and they can stay living with us for 5 years is what the program allows. And so 30 of them were paying, have the no rents, and 43 of them were paying half. And I'm having trouble seeing from here. And you can see that most of the students were from PCC, followed by PSU and Mount Hood. Next slide. Sorry, these are the percentages of BIPOC students, LGBTQIA+, and first generation. So you can see that we're really targeting the students who are most in need, and our referral partners help us to engage those as many students as we can. And the hope is that we're going to increase the number of partners to be getting more referrals. There's a lot of exciting things happening in ARCS. We are now getting funding through the joint office. We're getting supportive housing services funding. There was a House bill that was passed with the support of Representative Dexter, and we'll be getting, we're expecting to double our numbers to be serving probably over 130 students this year with the subsidy. So we're going to need more partners to be referring more students. That's our goal. I haven't looked at my notes yet. I hope I didn't forget anything. So I'm going to take a second and if there are any questions right now, and then I'll bring up the panel. Yes. Right. Sorry, we need to be on the mic, I think, for the people that are remote.
All right. So someone from my end get to work in an opposite size of community, a little bit smaller, but we still have a university right next door, a Western Oregon University.
Yeah.
And we do know, I have an idea of, well, more work is being done there to really kind of get a better or stronger handle on the numbers of folks who our student population who are experiencing houselessness. And by that, I mean, we understand that some folks are houselessness. The definition is being in a, some folks are in a couching it, some are unsheltered. We have that data from local county commissioners. But in terms of, so that's kind of a little snapshot from our end. But here in the more urban I mean, really just I just want to get an idea of who the partners you're connecting with to really being able to get those numbers up.
Yeah, so the partners, can you go back in the slides to the partnership, the collaboration slide? Those are the partners we have currently. So there are 3 community colleges, 1 university, and 2 nonprofits. But my goal is to grow the nonprofit supports right now in the metro area. Those are the colleges. And again, people, they don't have to be in college. Students could be in a trade program, and we're open to that. But we we're kind of being planful about how we connect with partners. So I think in a rural area, connecting with your university or community college and any nonprofit partners would be a start to do that. Any other questions?
I was just wondering, you mentioned briefly that these buildings are not being developed using LIHTC funds. And I was just wondering if you could briefly talk about how you are developing them and what sources.
Well, nonprofit, Alex is kind of the expert on this, so maybe
Alex, we can catch up later.
okay. Do you want to answer that or you want to talk later? Give a short answer, maybe.
Short answer, CH&W has been around for quite a while, so we've been able to refinance a lot of our properties. So we sort of been providing a lot of the upfront cost ourselves. But we've also come up with some creative solutions like applying for Project Turnkey. That's been our biggest project. So it's just been kind of cobbling it together is really the answer.
And we've been focused on acquiring property and not building property just because building is incredibly expensive right now. When our building opened in 2019, my understanding is it was a lot more affordable, at least when we started that project, maybe not at the end.
I'm
right?
sure everybody in this room knows that construction costs are only going up. So
Yeah.
it's been a struggle.
So we've acquired 3 properties on the east side in the last year, including the Project Turnkey property. So one of them is next to PCC Southeast on 82nd and Division. One of them's on 162nd and Gleason. And then our hotel is in Gresham. Anything else? Yes.
I was wondering, the partners that are giving you the referrals, how are they finding these
Students.
Yeah, like,
Yeah.
are they, late on rent payments, or maybe they were hoping to get a scholarship, but they didn't get it?
Yeah. So all the colleges have what's called a basic needs navigator. It's a position that was created 2 years ago through state funding. So most of our referrals come through that. PSU has a basic needs hub. PCC is developing a position in a place like that. So basic needs is a very prominent issue in higher ed right now. Because there's a real division in people that are having support and people that don't, and the students that are being pushed out of higher ed, typically it's because of money, because of lack of family support. And so the basic needs navigators are there to provide resources and referrals. So mostly that's the way through our nonprofit partners. They're working with a variety of, like I said, mostly youth that are in other programs within their nonprofit, and they know about our organization, and then they make a referral that way. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to have time for questions at the end, but I want to bring our esteemed panel up here of students. So if we could go to the slide with the students' names on it, that would be great. And if you all wouldn't mind coming up. I think we need that mic back for them. Yeah. Okay, thanks for being here. So I'm going to start, since Alex is sitting next to me, I'm going to ask him to start, but I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself, your name, your school. If you transferred for a community college, if you could do that, talk about that. A brief description of your housing situation before you came to ARCS. If you could start with that.
A senior at PSU right now. My I'm going to graduate with a bachelor's degree in science with emphasis in music production, sonic arts, and a minor in business. After school, I plan on opening up a coffee shop and have music themed to the coffee shop. And besides that, with the coffee shop, I import coffee from Panama and roast it. And so it's going to be more on there. So I have a business plan after I graduate school is pretty much what I'm getting at there for you as well. My housing situation, when I decided to go back to school, I understood that I was going to, be tight on funds. I am an older student and I have children, so I am divorced as well. And so for me to live and go to school, I was going to have to live in a smaller place and not have my children over at my apartment because I wasn't going to be able to afford it. I didn't realize how much of a smaller place I was going to need. It was more of a, I couldn't afford anything over $700 or, and there wasn't anything there except maybe if you're familiar with single unit where you just live in a room and there's a shared bathroom. And those aren't always the nice places, and there aren't very many of those in Portland. And I was living in one and I was, let's say, content with it. I was okay. I was worried about things, but what happened with me was there was a fire in the building next to us in the May building that kicked all of us out of our building. And so I was homeless, if you would, or couch surfing, and at my age, or at any age, it's not great, but for that to happen so traumatically, was, very scary. I did have friends and family, and my ex-wife and I are on terms enough that I could still see my kids over there, so things were okay, but I wasn't able to find affordable housing. And that put me in the situation where I went to basic needs hub at PSU and was able to get referred. I did a couple months of couch surfing and everything, but I knew there was at least a chance of graduating as well. So that's
Great. Thank you, Alex. We'll go to Shadani next.
Alrighty, so my name is Shadani Lagunas. I started my educational journey at Mount Hood Community College. When I was there, I was working 2 jobs so that I could afford my $700 rent actually at the time. And that's only because I had 3 other roommates. So I did start out at Mount Hood and I eventually transferred to PSU, which I found that it was even more expensive to live in Portland, of course, than it was near Mount Hood and Gresham. Except now I really didn't have the option of roommates because it's more expensive for much less space. So unless you want to have 3 people in a studio, you're not getting $700 rent. So some of the situations I was in before finding college housing and getting referred to the ARCS program was I rented out a bedroom in a daycare at some point, which was nice, but kind of uncomfortable. You feel this sense of like responsibility too, because everyone's kids are downstairs. The parents are coming in and out and you just feel like, oh, trust me, I'm sorry I live here too. It's, it's pretty awkward. But besides that, I feel like I was lucky enough to find ARCS before I had to live in my car, before I had to be couch surfing, before I had to find friends of friends who had an extra room. And it's really hard because I have many friends at PSU and at Mount Hood that I know have lived in their car for a year. I have friends that have a boyfriend and both of them are living in one car. I actually hear students talk more about what car to buy because they might have to live in it at some point. Then you hear people talk about saving for a house. It's just not a reality anymore for students this time of day. Like nothing is affordable. I'm sorry,
It's good.
but yeah, so I'm at Portland State now and I'm majoring in computer science. I'm a sophomore in that degree, but I am a senior in my biology degree. I do hope to graduate with a dual degree. So it would be computer science and biology and then kind of just go from there.
Thanks, Shadani. Anna.
Hi, everyone. I'm Anna. Before I found ARCS, I couch surfed and lived in my car. I had a great apartment until COVID protections in my state, Washington, expired, and students were no longer covered by my housing program. So I got a letter in the mail that was like, you have 15 days to find a new place. And with costs in Portland and Vancouver, I couldn't find a new place. I ended up bouncing from really unsafe situation to really unsafe situations. Sometimes they were free, sometimes they were not very free. Sometimes they were free at first. And then once I had all my stuff and my cat there, they were like, you have to do this for us. It was really scary and really stressful. And I found ARCS because I broke down crying in my advisor's office saying I couldn't do another semester. And my advisor found my coordinator, Annalicia, who's actually here. And Annalicia was able to get me into a home within 2 months. So within 2 months, I went from living in my car with my cat, eating McDonald's for every meal, hoping that I had enough points on the app to have breakfast in the morning before I went to class, to having like an apartment with like a stove and a shower. And I'm in PCC right now. I have 2 associates. I'm waiting out my transfers finish free program at PSU. So because I was able to find housing in a Portland that I could afford, I am able to potentially graduate with a debt-free degree. Whereas I would have been taking out all that money to try to find somewhere to live. And so I'm hoping to graduate with an anthropology degree and go on to law school to work in repatriation. So yeah.
Thank you. I'm going to ask, let's see, you answered a lot of the questions. What barriers or challenges did you have to find affordable housing? You touched on it a little bit before you came to ARCS. I don't know if anybody wants to start with that.
Do you guys have anything? Yeah. I know Alan.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry. So the barriers that I found mostly was mostly trying to find a place that would accept you with deposit, rent. Not, I'm a college student. I don't have bad credit history, but I don't have good credit history. And so if you don't have good credit history, it's the automatic way of, charging you more, so that was the biggest barrier, was just finding the deposit, first month's, last month's rent, there's no rental history where I had issues with, but it's more of the barriers of trying to get into a place is very off-putting, and sometimes just let alone you're not able to find that. It's based on your employment, and if you're not making enough money, 3 times the rent of what it is, most places won't accept you. And so that was the biggest barrier, I guess, I found, was a money barrier, and credit worthiness barrier to it.
Thank you. I think many of the barriers that I've experienced anytime finding housing are almost non-existent at the Amy, where I currently live, which is one of the buildings that College Housing Northwest owns. I use them as an example because I've never ever lived somewhere before where you don't pay a deposit that is like 2 to 3 times your rent. I've never lived somewhere where they don't check your credit to base your deposit off of that. They don't do that. They also don't do first and last month's rent on top of your deposit. These are all things that beforehand could be $3,000, and college students don't just have that saved up for every single time they need to move again. And so I think that being at the Amy has made me see that these barriers don't need to be there, because a lot of the students that are there are still doing great, even though it's not based off of their credit history and based off of how much they left for deposit. We're not just tearing these units up, and they're brand new too. So it's really nice that we've been given that trust and that space to be like, you don't need to give thousands of dollars to live here, and we trust you to live here. And it's been really nice.
I think the money is the biggest thing for me, the deposits. I think something that we don't touch on when we talk about like student homelessness is how difficult it is to like live a normal life when you're homeless. I was honestly very lucky in my houselessness experience. I wasn't on the streets. I always had access to like somewhere safe to sleep, and I still had a really hard time finding a job because between classes and not having a home where I could shower or eat or cook, where did I have time to be presentable for a job interview? Where did I have time to work at a job for 3 or 4 months to build up credit to have the deposit? And then not only that, as soon as you say you're a full-time student to an apartment complex, they'll turn away on you because they'll assume that you can't afford it. So that was like really big for me, was just not even having the chance to do the right thing. Like, I want to pay my rent. I want to be a responsible tenant. I want that rental history for when I'm like out in the world, but I didn't even get the chance.
Thank you. How did you find out about ARC? Some of you have touched on this. And how has being in the program impacted you academically and in other ways?
I heard about it through PSU's basic needs hub. I forget the coordinator there's name, and I feel bad because she's very Lee's very helpful. Yeah, sorry, I apologize. Very helpful. Just to touch on the basic needs hub is very nice. It kind of a hub that you go into as a student, and if there's anything that you're don't have access for, they'll show you and give you the ability to that anything from food stamp or from SNAP to daycare or clothing. And so that's how I heard about the program, and they referred me, and then I spoke with Annalise, and then went through the process of that.
So I heard about ARCs actually through one of the students that had been doing work with ARCs. Similar to this, you know, telling people what resources we've been trying to get for more people and such. And this friend told me about it because I was about to get kicked out of the place I was living in. And within a week, I was able to move in thanks to him, you know, and that was a last minute thing. I didn't know where I was going to go. What was the other question? Oh, how is ARCs
changed academically? And
yeah, ARCs has made my academic journey probably 10 times easier by removing some of these barriers I thought I was never going to remove. You know, I don't have any family support to pay for rent or have a place to stay with them either. So housing was always going to be an insecurity of mine, it felt like. And I've even talked to Annalicia and Pam about how I still don't feel like it's real and that somebody's not going to come in and say, hey, we're sorry, we can't live here anymore. You know, it still feels like that every day. So yeah, I'm just grateful that that's not the reality with ARCs.
I already touched on how I found ARCs, but you can see it really clearly in my grades, honestly. Like, it's a very clear like trend. The minute I got into ARCs, which was fall semester last year, or fall quarter last year, my grades went from like C's and D's to like A's and B's. I stopped missing classes. I started like turning in more assignments. And like, it's just a really clear, when you're not worried about where you're living or when you're going to shower next, you can do better in classes, you know? Yeah. And it's just like living in a safe place. And I work in my building. I'm one of the CAs in my building, like having that stable employment, having direct like access to other people who are like me and dealing with what I'm dealing with, just makes it so much easier.
thank you. Could you speak, if you can, to what you think the need is for affordable housing for students in the Portland area? Do you know of other students having been through similar experiences? Shadani, I think you mentioned this already, but if anybody else wants to talk more about that.
It's always a hard conversation, but it's something that we can't deny and we can't beat around the bush anymore because of so many people that I know are facing this issue. And it's really just a constant battle. Any students that I talk to, any of my friends, it's a constant battle of which basic need will I be able to meet this paycheck? And it's either food, transportation. Luckily, I don't have to worry about housing in that mix as much anymore. But there's even books and such. And so just constantly having the conversation of what basic need am I going to be able to meet? And what can I do differently to meet more of my basic needs? And that's really just what our conversations are with my friends who are struggling in the same way and in different ways. And credit really has a lot to do with it. It's insane. I know so many people that their parents actually worked on their credit for them. And so even though they also don't have money and they don't have, I guess, normal resources, the resource of credit takes them so much further is what I've seen. And so that's yet another thing that I know a lot of people lack is credit. Obviously, most 18-year-olds are going to have zero credit.
I'm in a pretty unique situation where a lot of the people I know are dealing with houselessness, or not a pretty ununique situation where most of the people I know. Annalisa was able to get me and one other person. We ended up moving into a 2-bedroom together off the streets at the same time. So I have a I had a very close relationship with someone who dealt with that. And then also I would say 90 to 99% of my friends, it's almost all we talk about at this point. And I'm like the privileged one out of my friend group where I get to be like, help's out there. You just got to find it. And it's just like not actually, it's just not out there other than ARCs. So, yeah.
I guess, yeah, I guess we're all kind of saying the same thing. It's the credit barrier that gets you, if you're not at a certain level on credit, you are definitely charged more than someone that isn't, which is what it is. But that's the effect of being a college student, and no matter at what age, whether it's just the more of the barrier of getting past, the expensiveness of not having, the credit worthiness, there. As far as talking to other students there as well, a lot of them, if you don't live with your parents and you don't have the ability to live with your parents, you team up and you live with 3 people in a 1-bedroom, which everyone's getting onto that, and you're not able to do that as much as you were in the past. And so, you have to have everyone's, criminal history of where they've been. So the barrier of trying to get into a place and live how you used to, or quote unquote, how you used to live as a college kid, where, you had a studio and 2 of you lived in there and you got by, and those days you're not even able to do that because there's so many limits on, making sure that who's in our, building is supposed to be in our building. So, yes.
Thank you. So I want to open it up to questions. If any of you want to ask our panel anything about what they've talked about or anything that they didn't touch on. First of all, let's maybe have a round of applause for our panel. Any questions? Annalisa has a question.
Hey, I was wondering if you guys have thought about what the long-term effects in your lives are going to be. Like, how does the trajectory of your life look different than your peers who are not in the program?
I think that the trajectory of my life is much different being in ARCs. I think because I have experienced what it's like to always feel like I'm in a survival state, and to now try to get myself out of that survival state has been difficult. But I think that that changes the entire trajectory of my life, because you can only do so much when all you can think of is survival. You can only get so far. You can only think ahead so far too, because you're just thinking of the day to day. And I think that for people who have experienced what we have and without finding ARCs, that definitely impacts your life long term to always feel that way.
For me, I think ARCs was the difference between like getting a degree and not getting a degree. When I confided in my advisor about what was going on, it was with the intention to quit school and to like find somewhere to live and like find a job and just try to schlep it until I ran out of money and died somewhere. But now like I'm going to school and looking at the things that I'm going to be able to do with my degree, I don't think that I'm going to be in poverty for the rest of my life now. I think that there's a very good chance that I'm going to break the cycle, which is crazy and not something I had ever experienced before. Like the ability to have a stable place to live for a couple of years where I'm not only stable and safe, I'm also earning a degree. And thanks to the subsidy that I have from the ARCS program and the CA program, which pays part of your rent, I'm not only paying my rent, I'm saving money in the future, like putting it in a savings account where now I can save up for things. Like I can get a new laptop if I want to. Crazy. And just those small things are going to snowball into me having like a good life someday. So
For me, my path was, even if I was not living in the ideal situation, my trajectory was going the way I wanted to. I was about to graduate. My business plan was going on. I'm, selling my coffee. I'm doing well, and then all of a sudden, the fire happened. And I didn't think I would be able to graduate. I didn't think I was going to be able to, continue on. I'm already working, you know, I might be a little different because I have children. I work 40 hours a week already. I still go to school. There wasn't much more that I could do, you know, and so it was more of like, oh, okay, wow, you know, I just went to school for 3 years for not really nothing, but, you know, for not to get my degree. So when I went to basic needs, it changed it up there. I was able to see that I could graduate, you know, it would still be, you know, a little more expensive for me to live compared to what I was doing, but the difference in having in my own bathroom and being able to cook for myself is night and day there for you. And I'm kind of going to go back and answer the question about school as well. The stress level of school is so much different. School starts today for me, and I'm like, all right, let's go, you know, more so than last semester when I was like, okay, I'm gonna leave my apartment. Hopefully no one breaks in, you know, I don't have certain stress levels that I did before there as well.
We have made some connections with HUD. Ryan, who's our real estate director, he's not here today, but we have had some conversations, but and through our partnership with New Avenues for Youth, there are students who have been with us that have gotten some subsidies through HUD if they're eligible for them. But no substantive ones yet. You have another question? It's for the people that are remote.
Oh, this is for the Zoom. Okay. Can you hear me, Zoom? Okay. I'm sorry. I don't want to blow it out. That's why I'm just asking. So one of the things that the young lady mentioned was how she's actually able to save for, you know, a little bit of money and stuff like that, which I think is phenomenal and incredible. I just wondered, are the residents in your properties eligible for the participation in the IDA programs?
So I think so. So again, we're still building, but with my team, we're working on, especially when we open the Project Turnkey Hotel, we want to have IDAs be part of residency there because most of the students will not be paying rent, at least for the first year. And we want to build financial literacy. The coordinators are already working with some students on financial planning and saving and doing that on an individual basis, but we want to integrate it into the program so that it is part of our plan.
Okay. May I ask another?
You can keep going.
Okay, great. Thanks. So for the non-traditional students, I noticed that you have one young man here on the panel. And what is the wait time with affordable housing for non-traditional students? Because that is something that I would assume that would have been a first stop for him. But obviously there must be some
Our
incredible wait time.
availability is based on our funding. So when we get more funding, which we just are getting from the state through this House bill, we're able to clear our wait list. So sorry.
No, go ahead.
And for non-traditional students, meaning older students with families, we accommodate, we have studios, 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms. We have students living with children. We've had students living with siblings that are dependents. We're very flexible in that. And as far as a wait time, I think there's been a variety here mentioned, but Alex, I don't know how long you waited.
Okay.
So there was a wait list because of our funding. Now, Annalisa is getting people in 2 weeks or less. So as we have availability, again, we purchased properties on the east side that have been in transition and they're becoming more available.
Okay.
So yes, we're able to, as we have funding and available units, we're able to move people in.
Okay, last question, I promise.
Because of the transition. You know, I was not applying.
Funding. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So let me ask this question. I understand what the organization does, applause, all of those things. Do you also partner with other affordable housing entities to try and place your students or for residency?
Not yet is what I'm going to say to that. We're currently only housing people in the properties we own.
Okay.
But that is a conversation. Absolutely.
Okay, I'd like to have a conversation with you before I leave today.
Okay. And I've got a couple more questions. There was one over here at this table.
That was actually a perfect segue into my question, which was, do you have any kind of programming to help students transition out of your program? So once they have had, their 5 years or whatever, or they graduate from college, what does that process look like with transitioning out of these properties?
Yeah, so students are allowed to stay for 3 months after completing a degree, sometimes longer if we do an appeal process. Most students transition within 3 months. And they get the subsidy for that whole time. So, and also I didn't mention, but during the course of a year, they can take 1 term off, sometimes more if there's an extenuating circumstance, and they work with our staff on that. But we don't have any explicit transition out plans yet. But again, that is part of our longer term vision as we grow the program beyond, starting with 20, then we went to 40. Now we're going to be at 100, so it's all growing, but it is part of our plan. Absolutely. And I think that, the IDAs and financial literacy and helping folks have a rental history, all of that is integrated, but we want to be more explicit as people transition out and offer support. Absolutely.
Hello, I am from Eugene, and I was wondering, one of the things that we see a lot of in Eugene is the development of student-centered, like high-rise buildings that are very expensive and inaccessible to a lot of students. I'm wondering what y'all's perspective is on kind of creating student-centered housing from an affordability perspective rather than from a for-profit development perspective.
Well, that's what we're doing.
Do you have any plans to
we
like
don't-
move into Eugene?
We don't have the resources that at PSU, there's a property called University Point. That is what I think Alex was referring to. They rent by the bed. So you're in an apartment or a quad with other people and it's $900 a bed, let's say. That isn't, in our experience, that isn't what students really want, especially non-traditional age students. So we are in conversations at the state level, at the federal level, at what it would look like to get a large appropriation to do a large project like that. We're just not there yet, but we are in conversations around that. Absolutely. Yes. Other questions?
Love your work. I've been following for a long time, so it's good to see you building capacity. I think, along the lines of like partnering with other developers, is the biggest barrier to that just the restrictive nature of LIHTC and so many nonprofit developers are utilizing that as like a signature of their capital stack? Is that the biggest barrier, or what is contributing to the?
I think so.
Okay.
Also, we've been supporting students for a long time. So we have some integrated supports and culture in our buildings that we want to make sure students are supported similarly. I think that's my opinion as a program, right? We know working with our operations and buildings teams, how our students are going to be treated if they miss a lease payment, if they miss a rent payment, or if they are having a mental health crisis. Right. So in partnering with other nonprofits, we would want to ensure that there's similar kinds of supports for students. I know it might not be college student centered, but what does that look like? So, but LIHTC is definitely an issue. But and again, I don't know a lot about it. It's not really my area, but I understand maybe some LIHTC buildings, you can have a certain percentage of the property that may not be that people that aren't eligible for LIHTC could live in. I don't know. I've talked to some developers where that might be possible. Also, we've talked with folks around policy change, because I think that the exclusion of full-time college students in policy is pretty antiquated. And how do we get folks at the federal level to really look at taking that back? And I think that it would only benefit our communities to allow full-time college students to live in LIHTC properties, right? And so.
I have one more question, if that's okay.
Sure.
You talk about the referrals from community colleges, PSU. Are you getting any other support from those colleges in ways of funds or, land to build on, or, what other support do you get from?
So we have these points of contact that we meet with monthly. So we are, and then our staff are connecting with them. So if a student is struggling with a mental health crisis, for example, we have releases of information to talk to the staff. Also, I'm connecting with different people at the colleges, both around fundraising. So we're working with their foundations, government relations, so that it's really how the House bill came together was because of the government relations department at PSU supporting us to do that. What other areas do we connect with? Student services at the colleges. We convene our group of partners quarterly to talk about what we're doing, and collaborative fundraising is a big one. For example, our joint office funding that we got, supported housing services, we are, NAA is a subcontractor with us, so we're sharing that funding. Same with the DHS funding, we're sharing with New Avenues. So we're really interested in that collaborative funding model. Anybody else? Couple more.
You had mentioned that you have case managers at these residences. Are these case managers directly employed by College Housing Northwest,
Yeah,
or
they're right here.
Oh,
Raise your hands, please. Yes, we call them coordinators, but yes, they're doing case management and support and intake and and we're growing our team. So right now I'm hiring a manager as well, and then we'll be hiring another coordinator. We've determined that about 40 students on a caseload is currently what we're looking at as a full-time caseload.
Great.
It's light, it's a little lighter touch case management than like an intensive case management from one of our nonprofits, but yes.
Great. Question for the students. Have you taken advantage of the case manager services, and how has that turned out for you?
Yes, so as part of the program that you agree to meet with your case management once a month, and I met with my Joy, and yeah, we just sit and talk. They asked if anything's going on, see how everything's going on. Obviously, school wasn't started there, but asked me how transition and moving in was going. See if I needed anything was the question that was asked over and over, and but there was nothing that I was that necessarily needed, but it was known that if there was anything that they could do, just ask, they could point me in the right direction. And then just made sure that, I was, keeping up with everything, and there, wasn't keeping an eye on me too much, but just was making sure that everything was going well.
That's a good question. Do I take advantage of having Annalisa as a coordinator? It's funny, in the beginning, I did the opposite. I felt ashamed kind of because we were getting this help. And so I was like, let me not add to her workload. And so if anything was going on, I wouldn't say anything and I would just wait for like our monthly meeting. Now that's the complete opposite. Now I've realized as a first generation student, having Annalisa is a necessity. It's really like the placeholder for my parents not knowing how to guide me at all. Instead, now I have Annalisa who I can go to for anything. I think also since I'm paying for school out of pocket, I do have to go to her a lot for maybe a scholarship or anything like that we can find.
That is a good question. Annalisa has helped me with a lot in more material ways, things that I didn't have. My first apartment, Annalisa furnished it for us and got us everything we needed: plates, pans, dishes, alarm clocks, decorations, pillows for the couches. It was like having a real adult apartment. It was great. And going on, I received my associate's degree a couple quarters ago, and financial aid was like, you don't need any more credits. Annalisa was able to secure the funding for me to stay in school or stay in the school-based housing, even though I didn't need to go to school for a couple of months. And that allows me to wait out for my transfers finish free. So without Annalisa advocating for me with the program and being like, no, my student still needs this, I wouldn't be able to get my 4-year degree. So Yeah, I mean, yeah, I asked for a lot.
A round of applause for Annalisa and Joy.
We had another question. Is there someone else over here?
So do y'all have any like data for folks who are after your program for the 3 months actually go into their careers? I know you said 3 months because of the financial help and all of that, but I'm just super interested.
So we're only 3 years in, so we haven't had, we've had some graduates, and we just received a grant from the ECMC Foundation, which is a national foundation, higher ed foundation, to build our data infrastructure to be able to do a better job with that. So I don't have any current data on people who've left and how they're doing. Anecdotally, I think we do have some great data. 22% of our student residents last year attained some kind of credential. So, and many of them stayed with us, but some of them left for other opportunities. But I will, our goal with our data infrastructure project, which will be over 3 years, is to have an external evaluation done at the end of that. And, I have hunches, right? You provide people with affordable, safe, consistent housing. They get their degrees and they move on, and we're really able to impact their ability to attain jobs, have lower debt. I'm sure everybody's hearing about, student debt crisis. And so this is about supporting our students, but it's also a movement to really look at predatory lending for students, and students that are coming without support and not understanding what the student loans are really going to mean when they're done. So that's the financial literacy piece. So what we're trying to do is, as we grow, provide more and more components that will then assure positive outcomes. So
Awesome. I have 2 more questions. Do y'all have like job fairs for folks who are about to graduate? And then do you have like an alumni association party for folks who are moving on?
yeah, we don't have any of that yet. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. We have some more time. If anybody else has a question, there's one here. Yes.
Someone asked on Zoom a while ago, they were wondering about the houselessness rate, if that was national or statewide on your slide at the beginning.
So there were 2 slides, and we could share those, I think, with folks. But the local one, the house is housing insecurity, about 50% statewide for community college students. That was community college students that were surveyed, and about, I think it was 22%, 20% homelessness. And that was in 2019. Yeah. Yes, question?
So what are the communities that you guys serve? Like the requirements, are there any specific requirements for a student to join the program, such as BIPOC communities, undocumented people, refugees?
They just have to be referred by one of our partners, and then there is some criteria about being enrolled in college. If they're not enrolled yet, they have to have a pretty solid plan to be enrolled. If they're not eligible for financial aid, if they're undocumented, there are other resources. We have to figure out how they're going to pay for college. Yeah, so there's no restriction. It's just being referred by one of our partners, and the partners know kind of what the criteria are, and they go through a process, and then Annalisa gets involved and talks to the student. So there are situations where they're referred and they're not able to pay their half of the rent, for example. We had situations with people being not honest with us about being in school, and then unfortunately when we learn that, and they learn they're not eligible for the program, and then it's difficult to have them leave. So we want to avoid that. So we don't want people to come in just to be housed, because that's really going to make things worse for them. We have unfortunately had a couple of evictions with those situations, and we think somebody coming in that's houseless and then faces an eviction is worse than when they came. And we don't want to do that. So we were changing our processes and procedures to make sure that there's some evidence of enrollment before they are housed. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
There's another question in the back again.
So do students find out like at Portland State or PCC about this resource at the Career Center or, the Student Government Office? I'm just curious because I've never heard of it and I went to PCC in Portland State. So I'm like, wow, I would have benefited from this.
Well, it's really new, so I don't know
Yeah.
how long ago you were there, but we're really new and the basic needs hubs are new. So Alex was saying their basic need hub at PSU is pretty central. I think it's in this, is it in the student union building? So it's on their website. PCC is building out their hub. They do have a basic needs navigator staff. And then we have contacts with a couple different people at PCC that make referrals, but I think that it's soon going to be running through their care team. So they have a kind of district-wide care team. So it's all evolving kind of as we speak. Yeah. And it's all pretty new. So our organization's been around a long time, but the ARCS program is pretty new. Yeah. Anybody else? So I want to just say a few things before we say goodbye, and we can let you go to lunch a little early. So I have this fact sheet that Joy put together. I have a few of them if anybody's interested. Also, we're building something pretty exciting. We're pretty excited about it. And it is kind of I feel like it's a movement to really highlight what these students have experienced and really thousands more are experiencing, and what we can do to support them, to help them attain their dreams, but also to end the cycle of poverty. So we want to connect with people, yourselves, if you know of other people. I'd love to chat because we're really trying to build more understanding of this issue and get the word out and partner however we can. So I just wanted to say that. I also wanted to say that I think somebody mentioned this is the first week of fall term for these students, and they came here to do this because I think they love us, but also they're passionate about this too. So I just want to give another round of applause to our students. So thank you all for being here, and I'll be happy to answer more questions if you have any. I'll be up here.